Levelin Up Nation, this is your host, Brigham Black. I'm so excited today. We have another very special guest, Melanie Johnson. She is an elite professional in publishing, and we are going to be talking about how she went from being a wonderful beauty queen to being a storybook publisher. She's got an array of amazing insights as an entrepreneur. She's been a television anchor, been able to literally grow two massive multi-million-dollar experiences doing that on television. She's actually the runner-up to Miss Michigan, and we're going to talk a little bit about how that informed her professional career, and runner-up to Miss America. That's what I said. I meant to say runner-up to Miss America. So that's amazing. So you've had a diverse background, and we're going to talk about her experience in publishing, in really selling your story and how it brands yourself and how important it is in every facet of your business. So Melanie, welcome to Levelin Up.
Thanks, Brig. I'm so happy to be here. Love your energy. It's just such a great show. I'm just so honored to be here.
Oh, thank you so much. Well, let's dive straight in here. When people hear a beauty queen, they're like, well, they're thinking of their local pageants, but you took it to that next level, winning at state level and then going and representing literally America. First runner-up, that's a huge responsibility and a great title. Let's start. How did that inform your business career, inform your publishing, and really launch your public speaking?
Well, it's called try again and not get discouraged. So the first time I went to Miss Michigan, I didn't even know the local pageant was connected to Miss Michigan. So I was like, what? I thought I was just doing this little city thing. I had no idea. So I went up there, totally bombed. It was terrible. My talent was dancing. I did this little jazz dance and I was just awful. So, my competitive spirit clicked in. I come from a family of competitors. My dad was a Golden Glove boxer. My brother is an four-time All-American wrestler and in the Wrestling Hall of Fame. And so I was like, I have to do better. That was just awful. So went back. I studied dance for a couple years, went back as a classical ballerina. And I remember praying, God, just let me do my best. If I do my best, I know I'm going to win. And so I did. I went up there, I did my best, and I was third runner up. Yay. Right. So be careful what you ask for and what you're putting into the universe. Right. So I decided to go one more time. I was just out of college. I had been doing the auto shows, touring around as an auto show model. And I was also always a singer. So I decided I got a gig as a singer on the side doing these cabaret shows. So I thought I'm going to go back as a singer. And I had one person say, you should go back to being a dancer after one of my judges. But I knew I was a pretty good singer. I'd always taken voice lessons. So I went back as a singer. And this time my prayer was that I would become Miss Michigan. I'm like, I want the title, right? That's, if you're going after things in business, you have to say, what exactly do you want? Put the figure, like how many new clients you want, how much new revenue you want. Don't just say, I want to have more. Well, more could be a penny, right? So when I said I wanted to do my best, didn't mean I was going to beat out everybody else. So that next time I was first runner up, and I'm like, dang it, first runner up. So what happened was during that time between June, when the pageant was, in September, the girl who won was fabulous. I loved her. She was, just an amazing young lady. And so during the time I decided to go cheer her on at Miss America, and between June and September, I decided I don't want to do auto shows anymore. I want to get into broadcasting. So I asked everybody that I knew if they knew someone that was in broadcasting. And today I still think that's still very poignant, because you should ask everyone you know if they know somebody. Referrals and, I know a guy kind of thing always pays off, right? It's those connections, those relationships that you build in business and in your life. And so I had two connections. One was for radio, one was for TV, and I ended up getting the TV gig. Well, lo and behold, in September, when I went to cheer my girlfriend on, she won Miss America. So that opened the spot up that I became Miss Michigan. So I didn't know if I could keep my job, because now I was going to have to travel as Miss Michigan. Could I be Miss Michigan? So the TV station, they were no dummy. They realized I would bring publicity to the TV station, which several articles were written in the newspaper. New Miss Michigan, she's the anchor at Channel 20. So I was allowed to do both things. I traveled the state and did that. And I just learned a lot of lessons doing that. And when you're Miss Michigan or you become a pageant person, you have to walk into audiences. I mean, I walked into rooms, didn't know a soul. I remember Meyer Thrifty Acres is still a huge store. It's like Walmart of the Midwest. And I had to go one of their corporate parties in Grand Rapids, Michigan, wearing a crown and a sparkly dress. So you stand out, right? And I didn't know anybody, didn't have a chaperone, didn't have anything. You're just walking into the room. So, you know how to work with a cold audience, so to speak. So you do learn a lot and gain a lot of confidence during that whole transition.
I think that's amazing. So you had to walk into different rooms with a crown on, sparkly dresses, and just own who you were in your very deepest soul, knowing I'm here to add value. And one of the things I think that really helps you in business is sometimes we don't know where our customers are coming from. We don't know exactly what it is that their pain points are, but the more we understand them and the more interested we are, the easier it is to connect our story to what it is that they have
Yeah, it's
and what it
finding
is that
that
they want.
common ground, right? You have to find that
Yeah.
common ground with somebody of what can I talk to you about besides the weather? Like to be interesting. And being positive, I think helps, especially in sales and business, is coming up like, you're gonna love this. This is gonna be fabulous. Ensuring them that they are going to like your product of what you're doing. And just like when I walked into a room, oh, this is a fabulous event. These are great people. I'm so honored to be here. It's finding that and making people feel good about themselves and what they're doing and their decisions, I think also. And then,
I think
you
that's awesome.
e-business too.
Yeah. One of the other things that just popped up top of mind for me is whenever you are presenting yourself, why not go in the sparkly dress in your situation? Why not go with the crown on your head? Because as business owners, we want to be ourselves, but out loud. We want people to see us and recognize us because we want to attract people to what it is that we have. If we are not attracting people, if we are, with our hoodies on, we have the strings pulled tight, we're just sitting in the back of the room, nobody's going to notice and nobody's going to know what we're doing. So that's part of getting your story out there. Go ahead, Melanie.
I'm sorry. And, I had this conversation yesterday with a young man who's 24 years old. We were talking about personal brand. And he's like, yeah, this year I'm going to work on my personal brand. And we talked about everything you do and put out to the world represents your personal brand. The clothes that you wear, are you showing up? We talked about like Mr. Wonderful always shows up in a suit and tie. He may have shorts on underneath for, on his podcast, but how do you want to represent yourself to the world? And some of that can depend on the business. Alex Hormozy, we laughed. He comes out, he's in sweats or a workout, sleeveless t-shirt. I don't know if you know who Alex Hormozy is. He's a famous
I love
warrior.
Alex.
And he wears a band across his nose.
Strip,
You're like, oh, the guy who wears the breathing strip. But that's part of his athletic personal brand. So, I'm a publisher. I'm not going to show up super crazy because, first of all, that's not really who I am. But you want somebody that you can trust, just like a financial planner. You want someone that you look that they are trustworthy. So you got to figure out what your personal brand is that represents also your personality and the business that you're in. And hopefully those two things fit together. You're doing something that you love that does fit your personal brand and your personality. And then how to stand out with your personal brand compared to somebody else's. Like if you're a financial planner, it's kind of boring, right? I mean, they all look like bankers, but how do you make yourself different with the way how do you have the crown and the sparkly dress? How do you make your stuff and your personal brand stand out that way?
Beautiful. How do you have the crown and the sparkly dress? I think that's a great way to frame this idea of being your very best self. When you are dealing with personal brand, I think this is the main topic we're going to be talking about is storytelling. Your story is the most unique part of who you are. Nobody else on this entire planet has your story. So when you think about framing up your experiences, there's something that you brought up in your TED Talk that I literally took the challenge last night. I was like, I'm not going to bed until I do this little legacy building challenge. She has this 10-3-3 rule. Would you mind, Melanie, sharing a little bit of how you came up with that idea and why it's so important to leave a legacy behind of your experiences and your stories?
Yeah, it's so important to leave a legacy and tell your story. In that TED Talk, I talk about how the older generation, which I'm getting to be part of, I guess, the baby boomers, that they're like, oh, this younger generation, they just don't know. Well, did you tell them? Have you left it for not just that generation and generations to come? I'm working with a gentleman right now to write his legacy. And one of the questions I ask him is, what do you want not just your children, your grandchildren, but your great, great, great grandchildren to know that you learned during your life experience? What do you want them to read when they open this book about your life, that the mistakes that you made that they maybe won't make because you already learned them and that wisdom? So it's really important. And the formula that you're talking about, the 10 by 10 by 3, I think is an easy way to get your content out. You can do this a variety of ways. So we'll use a business as an example. So, because a lot of us are business people here, we have the FAQ section in our website. So think about the questions that you get asked all the time about your business and yourself and your journey. Over and over again, you're at a dinner party. How did you get started in this business? Oh, that's interesting. How could I do that? What are the things, who have you worked with? All of those types of questions, which the who have you worked with may be testimonials. So if you just set a time clock for just even 2 minutes and write down the questions you get asked about your life, your business all the time, then you go back and then you fill in those questions with the answers and stories that represent those. So I'm going to go to the next 10. The next 10 is the should ask questions. What are the questions they should be asking you that only you know because you've been in this business so long? Like a realtor looking, you're working with a realtor, you're asking them, well, I want a house this big, where should I look? And you should be asking where the best schools are. You have 3 kids. What's the best school system with the best resale value on a house? Not just, oh, I want an open yard. So, excuse me. So what are those should ask questions? So once you get the frequently asked questions and the should ask questions, you want to answer those questions, what the answer is, and then come up with 1 to 3 stories. That's the 3 for each of those answers that illustrates that. Because I'm sure you've had a client that you experienced the answer to that question, and maybe more. And it doesn't even have to be if it's your client. It could be a famous person. It could be, Steve Jobs, when he started his company, he went through this. So you're illustrating it. This is the easiest way to start a book and to get your story told. And you can use that content, which I love to say, for a book, which lasts forever. And you get global distribution on Amazon and Barnes and Noble and Walmart and Target. And, and people can buy your book all over the world. But even if you just put it on your website or you use those on social media posts. So another great way to create that content, you'd be like, okay, I have this, but to write it is so hard, but you're a great talker. So you can have someone like Brigham sit across from you and say, and it could be a buddy of yours, say, ask me these questions and record this. So now you have a video recording. You can put it on an app that we use all the time called Otter. It'll transcribe it in real time and give you an audio recording of it. So then you can just edit it down or send it to an editor and say, create a book out of this. I would say you can use AI. That's a whole nother conversation, but AI, tested it over and over again to take interviews and actually turn it into a beautiful, robust book. And it's just not quite there yet.
I think anytime you are able to encapsulate your questions and then tie in stories to them, that makes the answers more meaningful, because people rarely remember what you say, but they do remember stories. And that's the way that our mind is programmed. That's why it's so important for your personal brand to get your stories behind your answers. I think that's a beautiful way to start your book journey and to start your personal brand. I call this not mind mapping. I call this, I just spaced my title of all this. It's, story mining. That's what I like to do. So it's almost like you've got gold in those hills and you just need to figure out, where is that golden story? Because not every single one of your stories is going to be a winner. That's one of the reasons why you say, hey, we need probably 3 stories. Depending on the audience, there's going to be an appropriate story and example to answer that question. In a business context, you're probably not going to tell a fart joke. It's not appropriate. But for a little audience of little kids, maybe, it totally depends on your audience. So tailoring that message, this is one of the things when we were on our podcast together that we brought up, knowing who your message is for. That's part of this. So when you are identifying your stories and having it funnel into your personal brand, Melanie, which ways have you been able to identify this is the ideal audience and this story will tie into what their pain points are and answer it the most effectively?
That's a great question. So target ideal customer is the most important thing. We do a thing called a VIP book creation day for those people who are all over with their stories, their ideas. Do I write my book about my life? Do I write it about my business? I just don't even know where to start. I've got all this content in my head. So we start with, who are you writing the book for? Right? Who is the ideal customer? So once we hone it down, we always say, number one, do the money book first. Get the one that going to give you the most credibility, put the most money in your pocket by able to telling that version of your expertise, because then allows you the freedom to do a children's book, to do your life story, to do other things that go on top of that. That being said, once we hone it down, we're like, okay, when I first asked someone, like I could say, Brigham, who are you writing? Who's your audience for this book? Oh, well, it's entrepreneurs, 20-year-olds up to 55-year-olds that want to start a business. Great. That's huge audience. We want to hone that down to who your real ideal customer is, or that person. So we hone it down to, I'm just going to give you an idea how detailed it is. Okay, let's say it's Joe, who's 35 years old. He lives in Kansas City. He has 2 kids. His wife works as a teacher. This is how he spends his weekends. He golfs as a hobby. He likes to fish. We want every detail about that person. And why do we do that? Because so many times when you're writing a book, you get stuck on, I don't know what story or what else they want to know. So then you're going to ask yourself, well, what would Joe want to know? What questions is Joe asking? And so many times, a lot of our authors actually come up with a person that's in their life. They're like, there is this person that I've worked with, or he's a buddy of mine, and he's the ideal person for this book. So then we get back, it's even a friend of theirs, and like, well, what do they want to know? What story would really resonate with them? They're like, oh, you know what? They'd want to know this. And it really stops your writer's block, I have to say. And then you can even ask, if you have that person that you could even ask them what it is. But when you're speaking to your target ideal customer, it resonates with them. So you've got to do that work first. And if you don't know how to do it, right, then you can even ask friends, ask other customers that you have to hone that down. You can ask us, you can work with us to do that. But that's the starting block, is knowing who that ideal audience is, and then testing the stories. So if you're not sure about the stories, go ahead and share some of them when you're creating a book. You can put a story out, do a video post about it, see the response you get, ask people their response. You can just do a written blog post about it and see the response that you get. Test and measure. And the thing I love about doing a book, you could even say, hey, I'm working on this book. I'm thinking about putting this story in. Does this resonate with you?
Yeah.
Why not? Right. And then the people you're asking, they're like, oh, dude, you're doing a book, bro. That's great. When's the book coming out? Now you've created excitement. So when you have people share your journey along the way, you're creating a buzz and also creating an audience that are now vested. And if they gave you your opinion, they feel even more vested to buy the book when they come out.
That's a beautiful, beautiful way to think about this. I love this idea of saying, this is my journey. This is what I'm doing to put my book together. Here's my process, and tapping into your audience already. Because part of the way to become a best-selling author, I know you've created 3,000 plus books with your company, which is an amazing number. Part of that process is making sure that before the book is launched, people actually know about the book. It's not hey, I finished the book, now let me tell people about it. That seems like such a waste of time for the first half of the life of that book. So when you were thinking of this building of your compression and everything for launching a book, would you mind sharing us 1 or 2 tips to make sure that your book is launched in a proper way? Because you guys guarantee bestsellers and you guarantee awards that they get. And it's really niche in each category. So tell me, how do people do that? And why is that such an impactful part of your business?
Well, first of all, you need to work with professionals, because most people who want to become an author, you're not a graphic designer, you're not a book formatter. So even if you don't hire us, you need to work with professional graphic designers. Sadly, I had a client yesterday, potential client yesterday. She says, my book cover is done. And she showed me the book cover and I was like, eek. How do I tell her that's a really bad cover? That is not going to be a bestseller. So you have to have a great cover, something that's going to look like today, like not 1990, right? And it's got to be readable. So it starts with the cover. It starts with a great book too, because you want to have good reviews from the book, the content. And then the inside parts, like behind the curtain part of what we do is really we do a ton of research on what are the right categories for your book to make sure it gets the best first start. Our philosophy is if it was a football game and your book was a football game, we want you to score on the first play. Get that touchdown when the book first comes out, propel enough sales early on to reach that bestseller status. Then you're already up there. It's easier to stay there. And then you get the ball on the 20-yard line, right? Afterwards. So it's easier to keep scoring over and over again. So that's our philosophy, but the right metadata, the keywords that goes into it. And like you said, it's the book launch strategy. So you need to start ahead of time, let people know. And I want to bring up this word of vulnerability because so many authors, it's their baby. It's like you're opening up your heart and just like, this is kind of funny. In the green room, Brigham was telling me the title of this podcast. And I was like, oh man, I'm not putting that on my Facebook Live, beauty queen to book publisher. And I'm like, oh, I just can't own that. It's that, I don't want people to say, oh, well, you think you're great because you're writing a book or, you've got an ego. And so it's really this dance of, yeah, you got to put yourself out there because if you're going to go to all the trouble of the book, you kind of have to be humbled yourself to say it's okay to promote this. And the way I tell our authors is think about, it's not about you. It's about the people you're going to help with your book. I mean, you wouldn't think twice about helping somebody cross the street. You wouldn't think twice about at a dinner party giving someone advice about your expertise that could help them. So why are you thinking twice about sharing your book with the world? So really it's leading up to that launch, being able to craft your social media, start talking about the book. And then we do a lot for the book launch team. So the actual launch is a whole machine that we move this whole machine from, like from the 20-yard line or 50-yard line to over to score on that day. And it's a working machine, boy, I got to tell you, I mean, we are like, come on, let's go. We're cheerleading behind. We got to push more. Let's go. So it really is all of these strategies that have to go in there. And if you're doing it alone, it is tough. So you got to do your research. You've got to watch a lot of videos. I tell people, I understand if you don't have the resources to do it and you do have to do it yourself, please still invest in some kind of course or something like that. But it's kind of that time or money thing, right? If I equate it to like, if you're going to remodel your house, either you can learn to, like even just a bathroom, you can learn to be a plumber and put all new plumbing fixtures in. You can learn to lay tile. You can learn to put new cabinets and sinks in and to be a painter, but that takes time and energy. So would you rather spend your time and energy doing that or what you really love to do and accelerate your business? So we're like the contractor that comes in that has all of the trades and, the bathroom's done in a week versus it's going to take you 8 months, 10 months, or maybe even a year to do the bathroom. Hon, I'm getting to it. I'm going to work on it for an hour this week. So it's that type of thing. So I suggest, and this business, I'm going to say, has become dicey. So you really have to be careful. There are a lot of sharks out there. We've had authors come to us where people have taken their money and they've gotten nothing for it, or their book was a dud after they did it, or they're not getting the royalties. They didn't realize that the book was not published under their name and their account and username and password. It was under the publisher's account. So now what happens is you don't have access to change the price to your book, to update your book, to buy author copies when you want, and the royalties go to their bank account, not your bank account. That's really, really important. I think that's one of the big things that happens. And then if that publisher goes out of business, which we've had a lot of calls about people that just started, oh, anyone can publish. Let me just put my shingle up. And then 2 years later, they're not doing it anymore. They have all your files. You don't have access to your book. So if you want to do that book over again, and then sometimes they don't do anything with it and it goes out of print. So make sure you're really doing your homework and working with trustworthy people, that they have referrals, that you've seen their work, and you know that they are going to do what they say they're going to do. Very important.
Wow, Melanie, that's amazing. I think part of the value of working with a professional is you have a little bit of that stress relief because you're not worrying about, are they going to be out of business next year? Are they going to have my files? Great example. When you were writing your own books, this is something that I'm sure many brand new entrepreneurs, I'm currently writing 2 books right now. So trying to strip out as many of these ideas as I possibly can. What are the ways that you've been able to compress your timelines into such short amount of times? Because I mean, so many people go and they spend a year writing a book when in reality, you don't need that long if you have the right process. So what are some of those ways you've been able to shrink that timeline and be as efficient as possible while still getting quality work out?
Yeah. And, I go back to that VIP book creation day. So we spend 6 hours with a client, and we have a pre-day. And they spend an hour with us during the pre-day. They fill out an author form where we get an idea. And we even ask them, what's going to stop you? What's going to get in the way? What are the obstacles? Right. So during that day, I love it because not only do we get your target audience and a lot of other things we accomplish, but the crux of it is we get anywhere from 6,000 to 10,000 words written that day, actually written, the stories told, documented, and then we create a working title and chapters, and then we put that content into the chapters for you. So now you have like a semi-finished book that you have the chapters laid out, your target audience, and then we give you notations for each chapter. Oh, guess what? You need another story here. Oh, you're going to need some data here. So then you have a roadmap of what you have to fill in. Takes all that brain work out, right? Now, AI can't fill that in for you because it's your personal stories. But you can continue on if you're like, okay, that's great. I still got to get down and do it. But you can continue on with a book coach or a ghostwriter, or we have even a new program that we did where it's a co-writer where you're working back and forth with them just to make it easy. And I would say that's the easiest way to compress time. If you're doing it on your own, then I would say take 6 hours. Take that time to say, I'm dedicating a day to writing this book. But you have to have a roadmap and a plan because, I know me even sometimes squirrel. Oh, someone did this. I got a call. Hey, it's like I tell the story of, okay, today's the day I'm going to start to work on my book. I blocked out the 6 hours. What's the first thing I do? Sit down on my computer and I go, oh, I need a cup of coffee. Let me go get a cup of coffee. Oh, you know what? I'm going to get a new notebook. Let me go back and get a new notebook and crack out something new. Oh, I should really stretch and breathe before I start. So any excuse to get started and you're not there. But if you have someone that's holding you accountable, even if it's someone like you say, Brigham, come to my house and interview me. Do you have a few hours that you can sit with me and interview me? You've got someone that's making you accountable to do it versus just yourself. And, we all have squirrels.
We all do. One of the things I think is important for anyone that's doing this on their own as well is you don't have to necessarily have somebody else interview you if you have great questions. You can ask people online, say, hey, I'm writing a book. I'm trying to come up with frequently asked questions. What are a few things you would want to know from my experience? Then you can start to build some engagement. One of the other things that I've done with my process of building my first story, because I'm brand new at this, so I'm actually really excited to hear some of these insights, was I went back through journals. I've been going back through some of my old objects that I kept from high school and college and thinking, what are the stories that are attached to these? Why are these nostalgic? Why do I actually care about this thing? And when I'm mining out those stories, I have been creating basically 5 to 7 minute versions of those stories. And then I write them out and then I share them. I kind of do something weird where I actually go and use the story. And then if it lands well with people, then I will write a longer version of it. If it doesn't land well with people, I'm like, well, it's a cute story I can use on whatever occasion in a certain context, but that's not going to be a winner. And I wanted to hear your take when you are coming up with, go ahead, Melanie.
I want to backtrack a little bit because I forgot you said how other ways that you can shortcut this process. And I don't know why I didn't talk about this, but like we work with Jamie Roots. He was the president of the Houston Texans since they were started. And he had tons of speeches. He had done speech after speech. So you can correlate your speeches together. You can take blog posts. So there are these guys, that took their blog post and they put them together, edited the ones that they wanted, the best blog posts, and made a book. And the book was called The Minimalist. The Minimalist has then become a movie on Netflix. And then they did another one of all their blog posts and made it a movie. So, you can take blogs, you can curate the content you've already created. So don't think like, you were saying, gosh, I've gone through my journals and different things like that. So we wrote a book called Podcast Authorized. So you can start, if you're like, okay, you can start either with the book and the book can become a podcast, or you can say, I'm going to do a podcast and I'm going to talk about my frequently asked questions. I'm going to, instead of just doing that interview and recording it just for me, let me put it out to the world. And my podcast is going to have purpose, because then I'm going to turn all of those things I'm talking about into a book. And you have that purpose in your mind when you start it. I'm going to talk about this topic. This is going to be this chapter. These are the stories I'm going to put in there. And next thing you know, now you've created two assets, right? The podcast and the book.
Yeah. That's great. Repurposing any of your content. There's so many different ways that you can do that. One of the ways that I've found valuable is not just doing the podcast, is after I take that experience, then I can capture small shorts from it. You can repurpose the content and do it on social media. You can actually say, oh, that story was so good. Now I want to bring it up on more podcasts and get sound bites on different guesting opportunities. That was something that I've noticed whenever I'm on another podcast. I do my best to figure out what is one thing that I want to make sure that I leave with their audience. And that type of a sound bite, you can go and take and put it into a speaker reel. You could add it into your website, and you don't need, a 40-minute version of it. You might say, hey, this is going to be 2 minutes of their podcast, that whatever question they ask, I'm going to answer the question and then add this story. Sometimes those stories are the things that create connections. They're the things that let others remember who you are and why you do what you do.
Yeah.
So Melanie, what is the one story from your life, your experience as a beauty queen, as a luxury short-term rental owner? What would be one story that you say, this is what I want my legacy to be? This is what I want people to remember me by.
The pressure. I should have thought about that. I wish you would have told me before the interview that I needed that story.
Isn't that so fun? I love having great questions like that, because now that I asked you that question, even if you don't have the right answer, you can have a right answer for today.
I will say one of the things that was really monumental in my life started out as everything was humming along. So everyone's thinking you're on top of the world. I'm partners with my husband, 2 TV stations, huge mansions, living my best life, have 2 young children. And you're doing what you think your life is supposed to be. And then all of a sudden your life turns into something else, and you have to, divorce happens. And then your spouse files for bankruptcy, and now all the money is gone, and there's no income, and you're down to zero. You went from high to really low. And what I think people learn in their journey, you have all these people from North Carolina that have been living their life, and all of a sudden their homes are gone. Tragedy happens to people at some point in their life. And what I have learned through that is it's rainy today, but it's always can be sunny tomorrow. But it's really the attitude. And what I've learned over and over, my lesson from being beaten down, is that, I will tell you this too. I'm going to backtrack a little bit, is God will whisper something in your ear and he'll say, hey, you should pay attention to this. Like, maybe these people aren't the best people for you. And you're like, yeah. I got it. Like, get away from me. You're irritating me. And then he goes, hey, tapping you on the shoulder. You need to pay attention to this. I'm trying to show you something. Yeah. Okay. I'm going to get to it. I got it. Then he shoves you and you're like, whoa, all right. I'm going to do it. But then
I'm going.
And then he brings the baseball bat out and you get smacked across the head. Then I always say, God, please, I don't want the baseball bat anymore. But when you get down, like this morning, my cat was at my door meowing, waking me up. And I'm like, no, but kept meowing, kept pushing. Finally, I let the cat in, right? It bothers you enough that you have to pay attention to it. And you can only control so much in your life. And what I have learned from going through those experiences is control what you can control and leave the rest up to God. Because once you take that burden off your shoulders, you're operating at a different level. You're operating from a different viewpoint, right? And it's the faith that's gotten me through everything. So if you can let go of the burden and just control what you can control and listen to what's happening, it lightens everything. And then it's like miracles start to happen. Things start to show up in your life that you didn't think were going to show up before. I had, when my house was pending bankruptcy and they were going to foreclose on the house, several miracles happened. One, I think I was going to court. Now, I was very innovative. So this is like 2009. I put my house on eBay. People are like, what?
Oh.
You have a 25,000 square foot house for sale on eBay? And I'm like, well, why not? You never know. So I was going to court that morning. There was a guy who had inquired, and he said, my realtor is going to contact you and give you an offer on the house. I'm thinking, okay, got nothing, scam, right? I'm literally almost out the door. I check my messages one more time, and there it was. There was an offer on my house. So I printed it up really fast, made copies, gave it to my attorney, went to the courthouse and said, we have an offer. So they delayed my closing for 90 days because they had to do their due diligence and everything else. So I had 90 more days of income. And it was the weirdest thing. The person, the realtor, the guy that inquired, they evaporated. I couldn't find them anywhere. It was just gone. They came out of nowhere and evaporated out of everywhere. And I thought hopefully I was going to sell the house, but it gave me more time in the house. And I had things like that over and over and over again when I let go of the process and just paid attention to the doors that were opening for me.
Paying attention to
like
the doors.
Stories in one. Sorry about that.
I love that. No, it's a beautiful story. Every single time we look back over our lives, there are certain moments that become pillars. I like to think of them as like core memories or things that really impact how we show up in the world.
Mm-hmm.
One of those for me when I was a missionary actually was this time where I was coming home late at night. I was riding my bike. I had a exchange. So I had someone that wasn't even my normal companion. His name was Elder Oldham, who was behind me. And I was riding my bike quickly home because we had like 5 minutes to get home and it was like a 10-minute bike ride. So we were hoofing it, going really fast. And it was just at that scary time of night when it's a little bit darker and the headlights and everything, it makes it really hard to see. But I had this distinct impression as I was getting home. We were about to come over a bridge and I was going to take a left. And I had this impression, I need to get over to the sidewalk right now. Get on the sidewalk right now. I was like, okay. And as soon as I got onto the sidewalk, a car came zipping across the bridge and missed us by inches. If I hadn't have followed that impression immediately, I literally would have been hit by a car and probably killed.
Wow.
And it was one of those times on my mission when I realized sometimes we have those impressions that will protect us. And sometimes we have those impressions that will guide us into the future and give us opportunity to live and to lift others. Every single one of us have had those types of impressions. It's are we willing to listen to them and then do something with that impression? I had to move immediately. Most of the time you don't have that intensive an impression. It's more of a soft whisper. But for me, when I think of those impressions, it changed my life drastically. Like I remember my companion and I, we were talking like, wow, we literally could have died right there. We were a little jittery getting back. It was really hard to plan for the next day because we're like, whew, adrenaline's pumping and you're like sweating and stuff. But anytime that you are in the middle of building your book or sharing your story or something, there will be those little impressions. If you don't take the time to write them down, to do something with them, you have no idea how that could kill your story. That could kill your brand, your opportunities. Because every single time that we share a story, that can live not just with you, but with whoever heard it and then whoever they share it with. And your story has wings. If it's an impactful story, it will start to help other people. So Melanie, thank you so much for being on the podcast today. What was a question that I didn't ask you about your expertise that you wish I had? That's one of my favorite things to ask.
I would say, what does it take to have a successful business, to be an entrepreneur, right? I think one of the things is that you've got to have enough discipline and focus to get up every day and do it. Like, you're not showing up to an office where you have accountability. You have to have accountability to yourself. I mean, I have kids that are in their 20s and they're friends, and a lot of them are entrepreneurs, and they don't have a staff. They don't have a team. So what's going to drive them to make sure they show up every day? So it's having that joy and excitement as an entrepreneur to love what you're doing, or love trying to figure out what you're going to do and try new things, and learning to grow. So I think to have a successful business as an entrepreneur, you have to show up for yourself every day and have that discipline that you're doing it, and know what your why is and why it excites you. Whether your why is to support your family or to help other people, but really know that why and be able to, show up to change the world with whatever you're working on today.
I love that. Thank you so much, Melanie. Excellent way to put a little bow at the end of this, or a crown on the end of this conversation. Guys, I hope that this has been impactful for you. Share this freely. Would love to hear what your thoughts are. If there are frequently asked questions that you're like, man, I wish I knew this about storytelling, or I want to know more about this, feel free in the comments. We want to make sure that we are adding as much value as possible. Leave a review if that's something that you feel passionate about. We would love to continue to level up your life. And Melanie, where can people find you online so they can continue to interact with you?
Terrific. Yeah, we're at eliteonlinepublishing.com. That's our website. We're all over Instagram at Elite Online Publishing. We have a YouTube channel. We're everywhere. We're on every social media platform. And we also have 2 podcasts. We have the Elite Publishing podcast, where you can get more information about publishing and how to publish your book and write your book. And then we have the Elite Expert Insider podcast that Brigham was just on. And then once he publishes his book, he'll be on our publishing podcast. So you'll be able to check him out there as well.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Melanie. We'll make sure in the show notes when that podcast comes out, it'll be there, so it's easy for you guys to find. But thank you so much for being here, pouring your knowledge, your expertise, your experience, and your stories into the audience. So, guys,
and you know what? I will give you a link for a couple books, a couple flip books that they can get for free. So you'll have that in the show notes too.
Oh, that's phenomenal. Yes, definitely check that out. Connect with Melanie. She's an amazing expertise in business and publishing and short-term rentals. She's got so much value that she can create for you and your business. Thank you so much, Melanie, for being here. And guys, level up your life. Everything you do. Bujinza Twe. If you're not progressing, you're digressing. God bless.